My daughter slid the brochure across the Thanksgiving table like she was passing the gravy boat, and she smiled at me, the way you smile at a dog you're about to put in the bath. "We found a beautiful place for you, Mom. We toured it Saturday. You'd love the sunroom. They do a watercolor class on Wednesdays." Her husband nodded along beside her, not quite looking at me, checking the time on his phone like the turkey was the only thing left to settle. The brochure was thick and glossy, the kind that costs money to print. Maple Ridge Retirement Living. A silver-haired woman on the cover, laughing at a jigsaw puzzle she would never finish. Here's the thing they were all so certain about that afternoon, with the good plates out and the cranberry sauce sweating in its dish. They were certain, they knew whose name was on the cottage. They were wrong. And that brochure, expensive as it was, wasn't even the worst thing folded into my daughter's tote bag. I set my fork down. I let the table go quiet, the way you do when you want everyone to hear the next thing clearly. Then I said one calm sentence that pulled the floor out from under every plan they'd made about me without me. If you've ever been the one in your family that everyone assumes will just go along, the quiet one, the agreeable one, the one who pours the tea and clears the plates and never makes a fuss, then pull up a chair. This is the year I stopped going along. Welcome to my kitchen. Let me tell you who I am, so the rest of this lands the way it should. My name is Lorraine, I'm 71, and for 31 years I worked as a law clerk in a real estate and estates practice in a small Ontario town an hour and a bit north of the city. Deeds, transfers, wills, powers of attorney. I drew up the documents that decide who owns what and who speaks for whom when a person can no longer speak for themselves. I read fine print the way other people read the funnies. I was good at it. My husband died when I was 54. A heart attack on a Sunday in the driveway, scraping the first frost off the windshield. No warning. I went from a wife with a 2-income household to a widow with a mortgage and a part-time desk inside a week. So I did what my mother did before me. I put my head down and I built the rest of my life out of whatever I had left. I took the conveyancing job full-time. I paid off this house the autumn I turned 62, and I cried at the kitchen table when the discharge of mortgage came through, because nobody handed me that. I earned it one parcel register at a time. People look at a quiet woman and they fill in the blanks themselves. They assume quiet means simple. My family had been doing that for years. Lately, it had gotten worse. Those soft, careful voices they use now. Mom's slowing down. Mom forgets things. Did you notice Mom seemed confused at Easter? I don't forget things. I just stopped explaining myself to people who'd already decided what the answer was before they asked the question. My late husband used to tease me that I had the patience of a title searcher. Wait, read, sign last. I kept a little card thumbtacked over my desk for 30 years. Paper remembers what people choose to forget. I never thought I'd need that old line at my own holiday table. The dinner was my daughter's idea, which should have been my first warning. My daughter does not host. She arrives 20 minutes late with a store-bought pie and a reason she has to leave early. So when she phoned in September and said she wanted to do Thanksgiving at her place this year, all of us together, I noticed. I'm not the sort to ignore a thing I've noticed. I just don't always say so out loud. There were 8 of us around that table, my daughter and her husband. My son, who'd flown in from Alberta, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere. My granddaughter, Nora, 23, and the only one who hugged me at the door like she meant it. 2 of my cousins, who never come to my house but came to this. And I'd brought my oldest friend, Pauline. My daughter hadn't loved that on the phone. It's really just family, Mom. I said Pauline was family to me, and I brought her anyway. 31 years in a law office teaches you that you never walk into a closing without a witness. My daughter was warmer than usual all through dinner. She touched my arm twice. She asked about my blood pressure, about the stairs, about whether the driving was getting to be too much in the dark now that the days were short. Her husband kept glancing at the tote bag hooked over the back of her chair, not at his phone, at the bag. "You look tired, Mom," she said, head tilted. "Doesn't she look tired?" "I look 71, I said. "It comes for everyone eventually." Nora snorted into her water. She was the only one at that table who laughed. Then the plates were cleared, and my daughter reached into the bag, and out came that brochure, heavy and glossy and expensive, sliding across the linen toward me, with the silver-haired puzzle woman face up. "We've been so worried, Mom. We toured a beautiful place. Maple Ridge. Assisted living, staff around the clock, no more stairs, no more shoveling that driveway." "You toured it," I said, "without me." "We didn't want to overwhelm you," her husband said, smooth as a fresh coat of primer. "It's safer. It just makes sense. It's $6,400 a month," I said. I'd read the rate card upside down while she was still sliding it across the table. Reading documents upside down is a skill you pick up across a closing table. Who's paying that exactly? My daughter's smile pinched in a half-inch. We'd figure out the house, sell it, sell the cottage, downsize you. The equity would more than cover it. There it was, sell the house, sell the cottage. My house, my cottage. "You've been falling," she pressed. "You left the burner on last month," Nora told me. I looked at Nora. Nora went still, then shook her head a fraction, side to side. She hadn't said any such thing. "I've never left a burner on in my life," I said. "See, that's the thing," my daughter said, and she lowered her voice in that particular way that's meant to carry to the whole table. "You can't be trusted on your own anymore, Mom. It's time." The word trusted landed on the table and just sat there, like a dropped fork that nobody picks up. Nora's hand went flat on the cloth. Pauline set down her coffee very slowly and deliberately. Her husband eased a thin folder half out of his bag, the way a man does when he believes the signature is already coming and he just needs to get the pen pointed the right way. They weren't worried. I want you to understand that, because it took me a few days to understand it myself. Worry doesn't tour a building on a Saturday. Worry doesn't price your mother's house. Worry doesn't pack the paperwork in the tote bag before the pumpkin pie. This was a plan, dressed up in a cardigan and called love, and they had rehearsed it, so I did what I do best. I picked up my coffee. I took my time. I set the cup back down in the saucer without a sound. 31 years of staying steady in rooms where money was changing hands and tempers were going up will do that for a person. "It's a lovely brochure," I said. "Very glossy. I already had a look at the cottage on Tuesday." My daughter blinked. "What?" "The cottage, up at the lake. I had the agent up there Tuesday. The photographer plus came Wednesday. It went on MLS Thursday morning. Listed firm. Well, listed anyway." I folded my napkin. "Funny you should bring up selling it. I'm 3 days ahead of you." For a second, nobody moved. Her husband's fork stopped halfway to nothing. My daughter laughed, but it cracked clean down the middle. "You can't list the cottage," she said. "I didn't say it like a question," I told her, "and I don't recall asking permission. It's in my name. It's been in my name for 15 years. Did you never wonder whose name was on it?" Her husband's smooth face did a thing it hadn't done all afternoon. It calculated. I watched him run the math behind his eyes, and I watched him not like the total. "She's confused," he said to my daughter, quietly, as if I'd left the room. "Lorraine, you're getting confused." "I closed more real estate deals than you've ever stood inside of," I said. "I'm not confused. I'm prepared. There's a difference, and you're about to learn it." Pauline's mouth twitched. Nora had stopped breathing. My son studied the tablecloth like it held the answer to a hard exam. I did not explain how. I did not say a word about deeds or registries or what I'd signed 15 years ago. Let them sit in it. I picked up the dessert spoon and admired the pie nobody had touched. "This looks store-bought, dear," I said gently. "Was it the bakery on Mill Street?" "They do a lovely butter tart." "Mom," my daughter's voice climbed. "This is exactly what we mean. This erratic behavior. You sound paranoid. And there it is. That's the move. And I want every one of you watching to recognize it, because it will happen to someone you love. The instant the quiet woman finally speaks up, they call it a symptom. Stay calm at the wrong moment, and you're cold. Get upset, and you're unstable. There's no answer that counts as sane once they've decided you aren't. I stood up. I put a 10 under my water glass out of pure reflex, then laughed at myself because it was my daughter's house, and there was nobody to tip. "We'll talk when you're ready to listen," I said. "Right now, you're only ready to win. Pauline, would you drive?" I had a glass of wine. I drove home the next morning, the long way, past the turnoff to the lake. The cottage sign was already staked in the gravel by the road. For sale. My name on the listing, not hers. The maples up there had gone the color of a struck match. I didn't cry. I sat in the car at the side of the road for a minute with my hands steady on the wheel, and I let one question settle into me like a stone dropping through cold water. How does a mother end up owning the cottage her daughter calls hers? And never once tell her why. The answer was in an old shortbread tin on the top shelf of my front hall closet, and I'll tell you the whole of it. 15 years ago, my daughter's first marriage came apart in the ugliest way a marriage can. Her first husband cleaned out their joint account and came after everything they had, including the half share of a starter house she was trying to keep so that Nora, 8 years old then, scared, lugging a garbage bag of clothes between two homes, would have one address that stayed put. So I stepped in. There was a little cottage on a lake in the Kawarthas going cheap because it needed a new roof and a new everything. I bought it outright with the money my husband and I had set aside for a retirement we never got to share. I put it in my name on purpose so that no lawyer that man hired could ever get a finger near it, and I let my daughter use it. Every summer, every long weekend, Christmas at the lake one year when the furnace at her place quit. I let the arrangement drift the way these things do, until everyone simply started saying the family cottage and our place at the lake, and I never corrected them, because correcting them felt small. I thought love was cleaner when you didn't keep a receipt. That was the silence. I let my daughter grow up all over again believing the lake was hers, the way a child believes the lights come on, because they're owed. I'd kept that tin closed for 15 years. Before the end of October, every soul in my family would learn what was inside it and why I'd held on to it. But first, they were going to spend 3 weeks trying to convince the rest of the world that I was losing my mind. The text started that same night. "Mom, I'm scared for you. You won't admit when you're confused. Please just let us help before you hurt yourself. I already talked to your brother. He agrees with me. My brother." She meant my son, telling me he'd sided with her before I'd even finished loading the dishwasher. My son is 49, 2 provinces away, and has been allergic to conflict since he was small enough to hide behind the Chesterfield when his father and I disagreed about paint colors. If she was phoning him, it wasn't to ask a question. It was to build a chorus. The phone buzzed again at 11, and again past midnight. I didn't answer. I made a pot of tea and I read every message twice. Not for the feeling, the way you'd read a letter, but for the structure, the way I'd read a contract for 31 years, and the structure told me something cold. This was too tidy to be panic. Panic is messy. Panic repeats itself and contradicts itself. This was orderly, confused. Hurt yourself. He agrees. These weren't a daughter venting. These were exhibits being lined up before a hearing. She wasn't talking to me. She was documenting me. I'd seen it done once, years before, from the wrong side of my own desk. A man came in wanting to be made his father's attorney for property, and he had a file with him, a thick one, full of dated little incidents. Dad forgot the hydro bill. Dad got lost driving to the Legion. Dad called me by his brother's name. By the time anyone with a stethoscope actually examined the old fellow, there was a story 3 centimeters thick describing a decline that, as far as I could ever tell, had not happened. The father was sharp as a tack and frightened half to death of his own son. I set my phone face down on the counter next to the brochure. Garden photos on one side, a campaign on the other, both arriving the same weekend from the same hand. They didn't want me safe, they wanted me declared. So I rinsed my cup and I dried it, and I put it back in the cupboard where it lives. And then I sat down at the kitchen table and started doing the thing I'd promised myself across 31 years I would never have to do for my own family. I started getting ready, because if my daughter wanted a record, I was going to make sure mine was the one that held up. By Sunday, the phone calls had started, and not from my daughter, from the cousins, the same two who'd come to the dinner. One of them, all syrup and concern. "Auntie Lorraine, we just want what's best. Your daughter says you've been having a hard time." "A hard time with what?" I asked. "The falling. The stove. The scene at Thanksgiving." "There was no scene," I said. "I left before dessert." "Did she happen to mention who owns the cottage?" A pause. She said it's hers. Did she? I said, and I hung up gently, the way you set down a phone when you're not angry, only finished. Then the other cousin called with the same script almost word for word, which told me the script had an author. Then a woman from my church choir, lovely as can be, asking in a careful voice whether I'd thought about getting assessed, just for peace of mind. That word. Assessed. In Ontario, a capacity assessment isn't a chat over tea. It's a formal thing, done by a designated assessor, and on the strength of it, a person can be stripped of the right to decide where they live and what happens to their own money. My daughter was using the word like a casserole she was passing around the congregation. I understood then that she wasn't only talking about me. She was assembling a jury, one phone call at a time, so that, when the real move came, every relative I had would already believe the verdict. "Everybody agrees you're slipping, Mom," she texted that evening. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Everybody." As though a person could be voted out of her own competence at a family meeting, like a motion at the Cottage Association AGM. I'll be honest with you. It stung. Not the lie, the speed of it. How fast people I'd had to Sunday dinner for years grabbed the louder, easier story and ran. But I noticed something else, listening close. In every single call, the same details kept surfacing. The cottage, the house, the equity, not my memory. The real estate. Concern, it turns out, has a price tag, if you read it carefully enough. I found out who was holding the pen on a Tuesday in the dairy aisle of the grocery store. I was reaching for the oat milk Nora likes when I heard my son-in-law one aisle over, on speaker, not bothering to keep his voice down. "No, the capacity angle's cleaner than the money angle," he was saying. "If we go incapable, the house and the lake both follow. We don't have to explain the HELOC." A second voice answered, oily and pleased with itself. "I've done a dozen of these. Families on the same page, an assessor signs off, the rest is paperwork. We just formalize what everyone already sees. And the listing on the cottage? A confused old gal trying to sell a property she can't even keep straight in her head. That helps us. That's the picture." I stood very still with the oat milk in my hand. When he came round the end cap, he nearly ran his cart into mine. Beside him walked a tall man in a too-bright blazer with a lanyard round his neck. "Curtis Vanes," it said. "Senior Living Transitions. Lorraine." My son-in-law recovered fast. Men like him always do. "Small world. Smaller every minute," I said. Curtis Vane put out his hand like we were old friends from way back. "Mrs. I help families navigate these hard seasons. I'd love to just sit down and listen." "You'd love to list my house," I said. His smile didn't so much as flicker, and that's how I knew exactly what he was. Practiced that smile across 100 kitchen tables. My daughter wanted me out of the picture. Her husband wanted the money. But this man turned other people's grief into a commission, and he'd done it a dozen times before, and he'd do it a dozen times again after me. "Think about your family," Vane said, soft as a closing pitch. "I am," I said, "constantly," and I wheeled my cart to the till. Most people, after a morning like that, fall apart in the parking lot. I went home and pulled a parcel register instead. You spend 31 years in conveyancing. You don't panic about ownership. You check it. That night, I ordered the parcel register on the lake property through the same online land registry I'd used 10,000 times. Owner. My name, mine alone. Acquired 15 years ago. No transfers. No co-owner ever added. No mortgage. No lien. No line of credit registered against it, because you cannot register a charge against a property in your name when the property is in mine. And any bank in this country would have laughed my son-in-law out of the branch if he'd tried. That, by the way, is the part they always get wrong in the made-up versions of these stories. You cannot borrow against a roof that isn't yours. The title won't allow it. So they weren't going after the cottage with a loan. They were going after me. They wanted me declared incapable so a power of attorney could sell the cottage for me, with my own name on every page, and the money funneled out the back to cover debts that had nothing to do with me. I sat with that a while, not gloating, just certain. Then I opened the shortbread tin and lifted out the photograph I keep underneath the deed. My daughter at 26. Standing on the cottage dock the first summer after her divorce, Nora on her hip in a little orange life jacket, both of them squinting and grinning at the same time, because for the first time in a year, they had somewhere nobody could take from them. I took that picture myself. I remember the loosening in my own chest as I framed it, the relief of it, like setting down something heavy you've carried so long you forgot it was heavy. I bought that place so my daughter would feel safe. Now my daughter wanted to use the same kind of paperwork I'd protected her with to lock her own mother away. I want you to understand something, because it's the hinge the whole thing turns on. I wasn't angry. Anger is loud, and loud makes mistakes, and they were counting on me to be loud. I wasn't loud. I was accurate. I wasn't going to scream that I owned the lake. I was going to be ready to prove it on paper, in front of every relative she'd recruited as her jury. If you've ever sat in a room and listened to the people you raised talk about you in the third person while you're standing right there. Leave. A single word in the comments. I read everyone, and if a quiet paper and patience kind of justice is your idea of satisfying, you'll want to stay with me, because the meeting they set up to corner me is where the whole thing turns over. Nora came by Thursday after her shift at the cafe, still in her apron, eyes red. I heard them, she said, before I'd even got the door shut. Mom and, at dinner last night. They didn't know I'd come in the back. I poured the oat milk. I waited. They've got a binder, Grandma. He keeps it at the house, pages and pages, dates, times you forgot things. She made the little quotation marks with her fingers, and her chin shook. There's worse. There's a form already filled out, with your name typed at the top. A power of attorney, I said. She nodded, miserable. A continuing power of attorney for property, it said, naming him. And, Grandma, it's got your signature on it. I saw it, but you never signed that. The kitchen went very quiet, the way a room does when a thing you suspected turns out to be true. No, I said, I never did. And right there, in that one sentence, my daughter and her husband had handed me the only things I truly needed. Because a power of attorney I never signed is not a weak document, it is a forged one. Forgery of that kind is a criminal offense in this country, and it does not require me to prove I'm clever. It requires them to explain a signature that isn't mine. They want to move fast, Nora whispered. He said it has to be done before you change any of your paperwork, before you talk to a lawyer. So that was the clock. They weren't afraid I was incapable. They were terrified I was capable, and that I'd find out in time. Did you see a date? I asked. End of the month. November 1st, he kept saying, like a deadline. I thought about the deed in the tin and the photograph beneath it, and a phone call I needed to make first thing in the morning. Thank you, I said. You did the right thing telling me, now this isn't yours to carry. You carried me, she said. Not a feeling, a fact. You taught me to swim off that dock. I had to look at the window for a moment. Before I went looking for a single sheet of paper, I gave my daughter one honest chance, because I think you owe people that, even when you know it won't land. I called her Friday morning. No cousins, no husband, no vein. I'd like to talk, I said. Just us. Mother to daughter. She came over. She sat at my kitchen table where she'd done her homework for 18 years, and she didn't soften an inch. Mom, this is happening. You're 71. You're alone. The house, the cottage, it's all too much. I manage 2 properties. I do my own taxes. I drove myself here from the lake on Tuesday, I said, level. I am not moving out of my home, and I am not selling the cottage to put myself somewhere I don't need to be. That isn't a negotiation. That's a no. You don't get to just say no. No is a complete sentence, I said. I've been saying yes to this family for 15 years. I'm allowed the one no. Her jaw set, and for a second, I saw the girl who used to slam her bedroom door, all grown up and learning to slam things quietly. You'll regret being difficult, she said, standing. When the assessment comes back, you'll wish you'd cooperated. When the assessment comes back, I repeated softly. Not if. She didn't catch it. She was already gathering her keys. The door closed behind her, not slammed, which was worse, businesslike. I sat in the quiet she left and understood the honest chance was spent, so I went to work the way I knew how. Dr. Sandhu had been my family doctor for a dozen years. She'd never seen me for anything but flu shots and a cranky knee. I sat in her office and told her the whole of it, the dinner, the binder, the forged form, November 1st. She didn't gasp or pat my hand. She referred me that week to a geriatrician who does full cognitive assessments and to a designated capacity assessor on top of it because I told her I wanted it bulletproof. 2 hours of it. Clock drawings, lists of words, numbers backward, the date, the season, the premier's name. The kind of testing that has no mercy and plays no favorites. A few days later, the report came back, signed and sealed, cognition intact across all domains, no evidence of impairment, fully capable of managing property and personal care. You may need to show that to someone official, I told the assessor. Then it'll hold, she said. Then I went to see Brenda, an estate's lawyer I'd sent 100 clients to over the years. Brenda is 74 and does not suffer fools. She read my situation in about 4 minutes flat. They're running a capacity play, she said. Textbook. And there's a forged continuing power of attorney floating around with your name on it? My granddaughter saw it. Brenda almost smiled. Then they've built a case against a woman who holds clean title, a clean capacity report, and a criminal forgery they can't explain. She pulled out fresh forms. Let's lock it down. New will, a valid continuing power of attorney for property, a power of attorney for personal care, the whole set, properly witnessed, naming people who actually love you. I named Nora and Brenda, jointly. Not my daughter, not my son, the 2 people in my life who'd ever shown up without an angle. I signed everything in a steady hand, dated and witnessed. My late husband would have liked Brenda. She signs last too. By the time my daughter sent the email to all 22 relatives, subject line, an honest update about Mom, the gist being that I was declining and lashing out and had threatened to put my own daughter out on the street. There was nothing left to grab. The cottage was listed in my name. My estate was sealed in documents the law would not let her touch. And tucked in the tin, alongside the deed and the photograph, were a doctor's report, a capacity assessment, and the knowledge of a forged signature waiting for the right moment. She set the meeting for the Sunday after Thanksgiving. At my house, my son flew back in for it. She thought she was building a courtroom in my living room, with the cousins and the church friends as the gallery, and Curtis Vane as her lawyer. She was building me a stage. My son came early that morning before the others, knocking like he wasn't sure he was allowed in. I don't think you're losing it, Mom, he said, over a coffee at the same table. I want you to know that, and yet your name is on an email that says I am. He stared into his cup. They're in real trouble. The money kind. His contracting business folded. They're months behind on the line of credit against their own house. I thought if everyone agreed, it'd be quieter, easier. There it was. The whole shape of my son in one sentence. He didn't want me harmed. He just wanted it handled smoothly, with his hands clean. Easier for whom? I asked. He didn't answer. Then he said, she's my sister. I have to back her. I nodded. I'd given him the honest chance, too. Finish your coffee, I said. They'll be here soon. They filled my living room like they'd already inherited it. My daughter took my own armchair. Her husband, the 2 cousins, the church friend, and Curtis Vane in a blazer the color of a pylon. I made coffee. I set out the butter tarts, I let them get comfortable, and I sat on the Chesterfield with the old shortbread tins beside me, lid closed. Vane led, of course. A leather portfolio, a gentle, practiced voice. Mrs., your family loves you very much. They're worried about your safety. We've prepared some documents just to make things easier. He slid them across my coffee table toward the pen he'd thoughtfully laid on top. A voluntary transition agreement and an authorization. We just need your signature, and everyone can stop worrying. Sign it, Mom, my daughter said, her voice wobbling between an order and a plea. Please, before this gets ugly. And, if I don't, I asked. Then we let an assessor and a judge decide whether you're fit to be making these calls at all, her husband said, flat and cold. The room went quiet, and they took the quiet to mean they'd won. I'm not signing anything today, I said. My hand, I noticed, didn't shake at all. After 15 years of going along, the one time it truly mattered, it was perfectly steady. But since everyone drove all this way, let's make a loving plan together. Let's start with the truth, item by item, and then this whole room can decide who in it actually needs looking after. And I reached for the tin, I lifted the lid, the hinge gave its small, familiar creak. My daughter says I can't be trusted on my own, I said. So let's talk about trust. I laid the parcel register on the table, the cottage at the lake. Owner, me, mine alone for 15 years. No transfers, no second name ever. It has never, for a single day, belonged to my daughter, no matter what anybody at this table has been calling it. I bought it the year her first marriage fell apart, so that a man couldn't put her and my granddaughter out on the road. I put it in my name on purpose, so no court of his could reach it. My daughter's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I set down the listing beside it, and as of Friday afternoon, it's sold. Firm, $470,000. A young couple from the city, closing the 15th. Their little one is going to learn to swim off that dock. A cousin made a small sound. Her husband sat down hard. This, I said, lifting the next page, is a capacity assessment dated 9 days ago by a designated assessor. Cognition intact across all domains. No impairment. I looked at Vane. Your capacity case is one sticky note in my son-in-law's handwriting. Mine has a doctor's signature. Then I lifted out the last thing, and I held it up so they could all see it. A copy Nora had photographed of the continuing power of attorney from the binder. My name typed at the top. A signature at the bottom that I had never once put there. And this, I said, calm as the lake in October, is a continuing power of attorney for property, naming my son-in-law, bearing a signature that is not mine. I drafted these documents for a living for 31 years. I know my own hand, and I know what it's called when somebody borrows it without asking. I set it down on top of the rest. It's called forgery. And it is not a family disagreement. It is an offense. My son-in-law went the color of the tablecloth. The pen Vane had laid out so helpfully suddenly looked very small. My daughter shot to her feet. Don't listen to her. This is exactly what I've been telling all of you. She makes up stories about owning things. She gets fixated. But the room didn't move with her this time. They looked at the steady woman on the Chesterfield with the tin of papers, and they looked at the shaking woman in the borrowed armchair, and something quiet turned over and didn't turn back. Sit down, my son said softly, to his own sister. Let her finish. He couldn't choose me, but he couldn't stomach the sound of her anymore either. Vane closed his portfolio. He'd done a dozen of these. He knew the exact sound a deal makes when it dies, and he had just heard it. He was gone before I finished my coffee. I never saw him stand up. Then I reached for the photograph, last of all, and I turned it around. My daughter at 26, Nora on her hip in the orange life jacket, both of them grinning on the dock the summer I made them safe. I bought that cottage so a man couldn't take the roof off your child's head, I said, and I kept my voice low because I'd promised myself it wouldn't rise. I put it in my name so no court could reach it. I never asked you to thank me. I never reminded you. I thought that was the higher kind of love. I set the photo on the table between the deed and the brochure. You took the safe place I built you, and you used it for a blueprint to lock me away. Worry is a gift, my girl. You turned it into an invoice. She broke then, but not the way you'd hope. You want me out on the street, she screamed on her feet, crying. Your own daughter, I'll sue you. This is elder abuse. Bring it to a judge, I said. I have clean title, a firm sale, a capacity assessment, and a forged power of attorney in your husband's binder. Please, bring all of it. Her husband didn't yell. He did worse. He smoothed his jacket, picked up his folder and said, flat as a shut door, "We'll see what a lawyer says." And he walked out. No apology. Just arithmetic. My son sat with his face in his hands and would not look at me. He'd had the morning to choose, and the room to choose, and he'd let both pass. The cousins didn't say it's for the best anymore. The church friend murmured something about the coffee getting cold and edged toward the door. One by one they gathered their coats, and a few mumbled the embarrassed kind of apology that arrives far too late to mean much but counts for something all the same. Pauline stayed. Nora stayed. My daughter was the last to leave, mascara ruined, looking back at me from the doorway. My doorway, with no idea she was standing in almost the same pose as the photograph on the table, just 20 years older and reaching to take instead of asking to be saved. Here's the loving plan, since everyone came for one, I said, gentle and final. I'm staying in my home. The cottage closes on the 15th, and not $1 of it is paying down anybody's line of credit but my own peace and quiet. I love you. I'll love you till the day I die. But I'm done being the floor you stand on while you reach for my walls. You've got until then to sort out your own house, and I'll help you carry boxes if it comes to that. I won't help you skip the lesson. My door stays open. The deed stays mine. You'll have to learn to live with both being true at once. She didn't recognize the doorway. That, more than anything she'd done all month, told me I'd made the right call. The sale closed on the 15th. The line of credit against their own house was theirs to face, the ordinary way, and they downsized to a rental with both their names on the lease. No capacity application was ever filed. You don't bring one against a woman holding a clean assessment, which is exactly why Curtis Vane evaporated. My son emailed 3 lines, sorry it had gotten so heated, sorry it got loud, not sorry he'd signed on. I wrote back 2 words, I know. My daughter sent a long message a week later, full of everything I'd done to her and nothing she'd done to me. I read it once. Some letters don't deserve a reply, only a closed lid. I took the brochure off my counter at last, folded it once, and dropped it in the blue bin with the flyers. Then I put the deed and the photograph back in the old shortbread tin where the safe things live, and I set it on the shelf, and the hinge creaked shut the way it has my whole life. The house was mine. It always had been. Worry is a gift, not an invoice, not a verdict, and never, ever a key to your mother's front door.